Welcome to the deep dive. Today, I want you to picture a masterclass in culinary engineering.
Oh, that sounds intense.
Right. I mean, when I say that, you are probably picturing a massive leather-bound encyclopedia of French gastronomy, aren't you?
Yeah, like one of those books that's so heavy it could double as a doorstop.
Exactly. Filled with, incredibly complex, intimidating instructions and requiring a pantry full of ingredients you can't even pronounce.
That is a very common trap we fall into.
It really is. We have this ingrained assumption that true brilliance requires volume and that complexity automatically equals quality.
We assume that to get a sophisticated result, we have to endure this punishingly complicated process. But looking at what we're diving into today, that assumption gets completely tested.
And frankly, dismantled, which is exactly why I'm so excited for this. We aren't looking at a multi-volume culinary encyclopedia today.
No, not at all.
We are looking at a single, humble, handwritten piece of paper. It's a recipe for mushroom soup written by a woman named Joan Cole up in the northeast of England.
It's just a brilliant little artifact.
It really is. And our mission today is to unpack this unassuming list of instructions. We want to discover the surprising culinary mechanics, the precise mathematics, and, well, the masterclass in efficiency that are all hiding in plain sight in Joan's notes.
Because we are going to treat this recipe not just as a quick weeknight meal idea, but as a genuine artifact of brilliant, no-nonsense home cooking.
Yeah.
When you strip away the pretension of high-end dining, what you are left with is pure technique. Joan has mapped out this testament to how an understanding of food science can elevate the most basic pantry staples.
It really is a masterclass masquerading as a quick sticky note. I mean, at first glance, it looks like something you'd rapidly jot down while on the phone.
That's just a quick scribble.
But the more you analyze the specific words Joan chose, the more you realize there is some deep strategic thinking happening here. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Starting with the ingredients, because when you look at the top half of this page, there's this fascinating tension between absolute frugality and highly specific demands.
The word tension is really spot on there. It reads like a very deliberate exercise in culinary economics. Joan is making distinct choices about where to allocate her resources.
Let's look at the abbreviations first, just to see that economy in action. She writes marge for margarine. Not some expensive grass-fed artisan butter, just basic marg.
Just the everyday stuff.
Right. Then we have pea flour, which is plain flour. She specifically calls for semi-skimmed milk. Not heavy cream, not double cream.
Keeping it accessible.
Totally. And then for the base, she explicitly notes 1 stock cube plus water to make the chicken stock. It's incredibly budget conscious.
It really is.
I mean, it looks like a perfectly balanced household budget where someone knows exactly how to cut corners without bringing down the structural integrity of the house.
And that economic approach is very characteristic of smart home cooking, especially in places like the northeast of England where practicality and, making the most of your pantry staples is just a daily reality.
Yeah, you use what you have.
Exactly. But it also shows a total lack of ego. A stock cube provides a concentrated hit of sodium and dehydrated savory notes without the need to simmer bones for 12 hours.
Nobody has time for that on a Tuesday.
Right. And margarine provides the necessary lipid base without the high cost of dairy fat.
I follow the logic there.
Yeah.
But here's where I have to push back a little bit on Joan.
Ooh.
Yeah, right at the end of this list of highly accessible, budget-friendly ingredients, she specifically demands freshly ground black pepper.
Ah.
Not just pepper,
Right.
freshly ground. Why demand the fancy freshly ground stuff when you are perfectly content using a dehydrated stock cube and margarine?
It seems like a contradiction, right?
It feels like a sudden shift to culinary snobbery
Oh.
at the very end of a frugal list.
What's fascinating here is that this isn't snobbery at all. It is a demonstration of an incredibly sharp understanding of how flavor actually works on a molecular level.
Really? Just from the pepper?
Yes. You see, when you look at a whole peppercorn, you are looking at a protective shell. And inside that shell are highly volatile essential oils.
Volatile meaning they evaporate quickly.
Precisely. The chemical compound that gives black pepper its physical heat, that slight burning sensation on your tongue, is called a piperine.
Okay, piperine.
And piperine is relatively stable. It sticks around. But the aroma of the pepper, that beautiful, complex, piney, slightly citrusy scent that comes from terpenes, and terpenes are volatile oils.
Oh, wow.
The second you crush that peppercorn, oxygen rushes in, and those delicate oils begin to evaporate right into the air.
So if I buy like a tub of pre-ground black pepper from the grocery store,
Those oils evaporated months ago in a factory somewhere.
so you're just left with the heat.
Exactly. You are left with essentially a flavorless heat. It's spicy dust.
Spicy dust. That's tragic.
It is. And here is why this matters so much for Joan's soup recipe. Roughly 80% of what we perceive as flavor is actually olfactory.
Meaning it's smell.
Yes, it is smell. By demanding freshly ground black pepper, Joan is proving that she knows precisely where flavor truly matters.
Okay.
She is relying on the stock cube and the margarine for the simple, economical base notes, the foundational salty and savory background.
Heavy lifting, basically.
Right. But she knows that the top notes, the aromatics that hit your nose right before you take a spoonful of soup, those cannot be compromised.
That completely reframes the whole list for me.
Yeah.
She's saving money on the foundation, but spending her flavor capital where it creates the highest impact.
Exactly. It's not fussy, it's surgical.
It's surgical. I love that. She understands that a volatile aromatic compound is the difference between a flat, salty bowl of liquid and a complex, restaurant-quality soup.
It's high-impact cooking at its finest.
So we've seen how Joan saves money on the base ingredients to splurge on the volatile oils, but having the right ingredients is only half the battle, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Because if you just throw them all in a pot, you get flavored water.
Which nobody wants.
No. To actually build the physical structure of a soup, you need mathematics. And as I was reading through the architecture of this recipe, I realized there are some serious golden ratios happening here.
The mathematical precision of this recipe is arguably the most impressive part of the entire document.
It really is.
It is perfectly scaled, which suggests Joan has tested and refined this over years of cooking for her family.
Well, let's look at the fat-to-flour ratio first. She writes 1 ounce marg and 1 ounce pea flour, which she even clarifies in parentheses as 1 heaped tablespoon.
That clarification is key.
Yeah, it's an exact 1-to-1 ratio by weight. So, keeping with our architecture analogy, this is the foundation of the house.
Exactly.
It's this invisible, perfectly balanced structural support that is going to hold the entire pint of liquid together.
And in classical French cooking, that exact 1-to-1 ratio of fat to flour by weight is called a roux.
Right, a classic roux.
It has been the fundamental thickening agent for centuries of culinary tradition. Joan is using the exact same science as a Michelin-starred chef.
What happens chemically if you get that ratio wrong, though? Like, why does it have to be exactly 1-to-1?
It's all because of how starch reacts to water. If you just drop dry flour into hot liquid...
Oh, I've done that. It's bad.
It's a disaster. The outside of the flour clumps will instantly hydrate and swell, creating a waterproof seal around the dry flour inside.
So you end up with those gross, floating raw dough balls in your soup.
Exactly. A roux solves this by using fat as a physical barrier. The 1 ounce of margarine melts, and when you stir in the 1 ounce of flour, the liquid fat coats every single microscopic starch particle.
So the fat is acting like a tiny raincoat for the flour.
That is a perfect way to visualize it, a little fat raincoat.
I love that.
When you eventually introduce your stock and milk, the starch particles are kept separate from each other by that lipid layer. As the heat rises, the fat slowly melts away, allowing the starch to absorb the liquid evenly without clumping. Yeah, and if you use too much fat, the soup becomes greasy and splits. If you use too much flour, there isn't enough fat to coat it, and you get those dreaded clumps.
So that codified 1-to-1 ratio shows Joan has a deep, intuitive grasp of food chemistry.
Without a doubt.
And the mathematics don't stop with the roux. Look at the liquid split. The recipe specifies 3/4 of a pint of chicken stock and exactly 1/4 of a pint of semi-skimmed milk.
Right, which adds up to exactly 1 pint of total liquid.
But why not just use a full pint of stock?
Yeah.
Or why not do an easy half and half split? I mean, why this highly specific 75-to-25 ratio?
That specific 75-25 split is the hallmark of a cook who really understands flavor balancing. Let's break down the mechanics of it.
Okay.
The 3/4 of a pint of chicken stock is doing the heavy lifting. It provides a deep, savory umami base.
Right.
And mushrooms are naturally very rich in glutamate, which is the amino acid responsible for our perception of umami, that meaty, mouth-filling savoriness.
Oh, so when you pair the mushroom glutamate with the dehydrated savory depth of a chicken stock cube,
you get a massive flavor multiplier. It just amplifies everything.
okay, but if glutamate is so great, why dilute it with the milk at all? Why the 25% dairy?
Because a soup that is 100% chicken stock is just a broth.
Ah, true.
It lacks the luxurious mouthfeel we psychologically expect when we hear the words mushroom soup. We want creaminess.
Right, we want it to coat the spoon.
Exactly. That is where the exactly 1/4 pint of semi-skimmed milk comes in. It offers just enough dairy proteins and fat to create an emulsion, a creaminess on the palate, without making the soup overly heavy or rich.
And I imagine if you pushed it to, like, 50% milk, you'd start losing the mushroom flavor entirely.
You would. Dairy physically coats the tongue, which can block your taste buds from perceiving those subtle earthy notes.
So the 75-25 split ensures the mushroom remains the star of the show, while the milk provides just enough viscosity for that perfect velvety texture.
It's all about balance.
It's like a finely tuned engine. And wait, we haven't even talked about the final ratio.
And the vegetable ratio.
Yes, Joan explicitly writes, 12-pound mushrooms sliced to 1 pint stock. She actually underlines the relationship between the weight of the vegetable and the volume of the liquid.
1/2 pound of veg to 1 pint of liquid. That ratio dictates the physical substance of the dish.
Right, so it's not just a puddle.
Exactly. It guarantees that every spoonful contains the actual vegetable, rather than just being a bowl of flavored thickened milk with a few lonely mushroom slices floating around.
It prevents the dish from turning into a stew, but keeps it robust enough to be an actual meal.
Precisely.
Okay, so we have our perfectly balanced budget of ingredients, and we have our architectural blueprints with these golden ratios. Now we have to actually build the thing.
A method.
The method.
Yeah.
And here's where it gets really interesting because Joan just starts breaking the rules.
She definitely throws tradition out the window here.
The instructions read, lightly fry onion and mushrooms in marg. Add flour and fry for a further minute or so. Add stock and milk. Season.
It's very direct.
But wait a minute. You mentioned classical French cooking earlier with the roux. Doesn't that tradition dictate that you make the roux in a completely separate, perfectly clean pan?
Yes, usually.
And then carefully whisk the liquids in and then combine it with your cooked vegetables.
That is the traditional way, yes.
So why does Joan's recipe just dump the dry flour straight onto the wet frying mushrooms in the same pot? Wouldn't that instantly turn into a gluey mess?
You would think so?
Because water and raw flour are a terrible combination.
That is the logical assumption, absolutely. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, what you are looking at is the absolute brilliance of the one-pot method.
Okay, walk me through it.
It is a triumph of culinary efficiency over fussy tradition. To understand why it doesn't turn into glue, we have to look at what is actively happening in that pan. Joan has you lightly frying the chopped onion and sliced mushrooms in the 1 ounce of margarine. Now, mushrooms are unique. They do not have normal plant cell walls.
They don't.
No, they are largely made of water and a substance called chitin.
Chitin. I feel like I've heard that word in biology class, not culinary school.
You likely have. Chitin is the exact same tough, fibrous polymer that makes up the exoskeletons of insects and the shells of crabs and lobsters.
Wait, really? Mushrooms are made of crab shell material.
Structurally speaking, yes.
That is wild.
It is, and that is why mushrooms are incredibly heat resistant. You can't really overcook a mushroom the way you can overcook a piece of broccoli.
Oh, because the chitin holds it together.
Exactly. As they fry in the pan, the chitin matrix holds its shape, but the heat causes the mushrooms to release their internal water content.
Right, they always shrink down in the pan.
That water hits the hot pan and rapidly evaporates. What you are left with is the melted margarine, which is now deeply infused with the savory, earthy flavors of the onion and the mushroom.
Ah, so by the time you add the flour, there isn't actually a pool of water in the pan.
No water at all.
There is a pool of flavored fat.
Exactly. When you add the 1 ounce of plain flour directly into that pan, the flour is absorbing the seasoned, mushroom-infused fat rather than just plain butter.
That is so smart.
Furthermore, you are saving yourself from having to wash a second pot, which is the true genius of home cooking.
Okay, but Joan's recipe notes to fry for a further minute or so. I'm guessing that minute is pretty crucial.
It is absolutely necessary. Raw flour tastes exactly like what it is. Raw, powdery starts.
Gross.
Very. By frying it for a further minute, the ambient heat bursts the starch granules slightly and toasts them, cooking out that raw paste flavor.
Makes sense.
And here is the best part. Because the flour is distributed over the physical surface area of the sliced mushrooms and onions, it cooks more evenly.
So the vegetables are actually physically separating the flour particles.
Yes. The vegetables act as a physical whisk. They break up the flour, guaranteeing that when you finally pour in the stock and the milk, the soup will be perfectly smooth and lump-free.
The vegetables are the whisk. That is so wildly efficient.
Isn't it?
You get a superior infused flavor profile, a perfect lump-free texture, and you only have one single pan to wash at the end of the night.
It is the epitome of working smarter, not harder. Joan took a multi-step, multi-pan classical technique and distilled it down to its most efficient possible form without sacrificing a single drop of quality.
Which brings us perfectly to the final instruction on the page. Because having combined all these things with ruthless efficiency, she then leverages the final invisible ingredient.
Time.
Time. The last line reads, bring to boil and simmer 10-15 minutes.
Yep.
That's it, 10 to 15 minutes.
It's very quick.
When I read that, it made me think of setting wet concrete.
Right.
You know, you have a very specific short window of time where the chemical reaction happens, and once the structure is set, leaving it in the mixer longer only ruins it.
That's a great comparison.
You aren't spending 3 hours tending a bubbling cauldron here. It's like a high-intensity interval workout for dinner.
The wet concrete analogy is incredibly apt here. The time frame is highly deliberate, and the underlying thermodynamics of the boil and the simmer phases are completely sound.
So what's actually happening during those phases?
Let's break down those two distinct temperatures. First, the instruction says bring to boil. This is not optional.
Okay.
Wheat starch, which is what plain flour is mostly made of, requires temperatures at or very near the boiling point of water, so 212 degrees Fahrenheit or 100 degrees Celsius, to reach full gelatinization.
Gelatinization. That is the mechanism that actually makes the soup thicken up, right?
Correct. As the liquid hits 212 degrees, those fat-coated starch granules we talked about earlier finally absorb the stock and milk. They swell up to their maximum capacity and eventually burst open.
Like little balloons.
Exactly. This creates an interlocking microscopic network that physically traps the water molecules. That is what transforms it from a watery broth into a thick, velvety soup.
And if you never brought it to a full boil?
The gelatinization wouldn't complete. The soup would be thin, and the starchy flour would just settle at the bottom of your bowl as sludge.
But the moment it hits that boil, Joan tells you to pull the brake.
Yes.
You don't let it keep boiling.
No.
You immediately drop the heat to a simmer for 10 to 15 minutes. Why this sudden shift in temperature?
That is the second crucial thermodynamic phase. If you leave a dairy-based soup at a rolling boil of 212 degrees, the sheer heat and violent agitation will cause the whey proteins in the semi-skimmed milk to denature too rapidly.
Oh, meaning they curdle.
Yes, they will clump together, giving your soup a very unappetizing, grainy texture.
Nobody wants grainy milk soup.
Exactly. A gentle simmer drops the temperature down to around 185 to 205 degrees. This lower heat allows the flavors of the chicken stock, the umami of the mushrooms, and the sweetness of the onions to meld together perfectly.
Without destroying the dairy emulsion. That makes total sense.
Yeah.
But what about the 10 to 15 minute window? I mean, if I'm making a classic beef stew, I let it simmer for hours to develop flavor. Why are we cutting the heat off after just 15 minutes?
Because Joan knows the physical limits of her ingredients. We talked about the chitin and the mushrooms holding their shape, right?
Yeah, the crab shell stuff.
Right. Well, while chitin is heat resistant, it is not invincible. 10 to 15 minutes is precisely the amount of time needed for the flour network to fully stabilize, for the volatile flavor compounds to distribute through the fat, and for the tough chitin structure of the mushrooms to soften into a perfectly tender bite.
And if I ignored the recipe and just let it simmer on the stove for an hour?
You would completely degrade the cellular structure of the mushrooms. They would turn to absolute mush, losing all their texture.
Oh, sad.
Very sad. And furthermore, the longer you simmer, the more of those delicate, volatile, aromatic oils from the freshly ground black pepper evaporate into the air of your kitchen, rather than staying in the soup where they belong.
Oh, so you lose the spicy dust top notes.
Exactly. The 15-minute limit isn't just about saving time, it is about preserving the structural and chemical integrity of the dish.
This raises such an important point, I think, about how we view cooking today.
This raises an important question, yes. Have we overcomplicated modern weeknight cooking?
Completely. We are constantly bombarded with recipes demanding a dozen rare ingredients, intricate multi-step processes, and hours of prep work.
It's exhausting just to read them sometimes.
It is. And yet, this handwritten note from Joan in the northeast of England proves that an understanding of basic chemistry and a highly calculated 15-minute simmer yields a perfect result.
I think we often confuse effort with quality. We believe that if we didn't labor over stove for hours, the food won't be good. This recipe dismantles that belief entirely.
So what does this all mean? We started this deep dive with a humble piece of paper that looked like a quick afterthought.
A quick sticky note.
Right. But by treating it with the analytical respect it deserves, we uncovered a true masterclass. We found a precise 1-to-1 ratio for a structural roux.
Spot on.
A perfectly calculated 7-octane 25 liquid split designed to balance savory umami with dairy mouthfeel.
Yep.
A highly efficient one-pot cooking method that uses the mushrooms themselves to prevent starch lumps. And a profound understanding of economical seasoning where volatile essential oils act as the crown jewel.
It is a phenomenal document. And the real takeaway for you, the listener, is one of empowerment.
Absolutely.
You don't need a pantry overflowing with expensive, exotic ingredients to make great food. You don't need 3 hours of free time after work. And you certainly don't need to dirty every pot and pan in your kitchen.
Just one pan.
Just one. If you understand the fundamental mechanics of what you are doing, why the ratios matter, how heat controls the starch, the purpose behind each specific ingredient, you can create something structurally sound, deeply flavorful, and incredibly comforting with just the most basic provisions.
It essentially hands us the keys to the culinary kingdom, which leaves us with a pretty incredible opportunity to experiment.
It does.
We know that the golden rule of Joan's handwritten masterpiece is exactly half a pound of sliced vegetables to exactly 1 pint of liquid, held together by a 1-ounce fat and flour roux.
The golden ratio.
So here is a final provocative thought for you to take with you into your own kitchen today. What other vegetables sitting in your fridge right now could you swap in tonight?
Oh, the possibilities.
Right. Do you have broccoli, leeks, maybe some leftover cauliflower?
Cauliflower would be amazing.
It would. If you applied this exact same mathematical formula and respect the same 15-minute thermodynamic window, you aren't just making dinner. You are inventing your very own masterpiece, built on a flawless, time-tested foundation.